Let's use systems of equations to solve word problems. In our first word problems, we know that Dixie College their enrollment increased by 1,800 students, and that there were 400 more new female students than new male students. We're going to answer how many new students were women and how many were men. So there are two quantities that we don't know, and that's the number of new women students and the number of new male students. So we will let each variable, we're going to start with x, we're going to let x represent the number of new female students enrolled, and then we're going to let y represent the number of new male students enrolled. And as soon as you define two variables to solve a word problem, then you know you're going to need two equations. So the first equation, we're going to use this second sentence that says that there are 400 more new female students than new male students. So x, the number of female students, is 400 more than the number of male students, y. So that's how we get the first equation. X is 400 more than y. The second equation says that the total enrollment was 1,800 more students, so this x plus y has to equal 1,800. Now these two equations are perfectly set for us to solve by using the substitution method. So if you can see here, this top equation says that x is equal to 400 plus y. So we're going to take that 400 plus y and substitute it for x in the second equation. So we get 400 plus y plus another y equals 1,800. And now let's add together some like terms here. We have 400 plus 2y equals 1,800. And we're going to subtract 400 to both sides because we want to isolate our y. So let's subtract 400 from both sides. And then that gives us 2y equals 1,400. And now dividing by 2, we get that y is 700. So remember again that y was the number of new male students. So we've answered part B. There are 700 new male students. And x is 400 more than that. So the number of female students is 400 plus 700, or 1,100 students. And that answers part A. This problem is a mixture problem, which we've done previously with one variable, but this time we're going to do solve it with using two variables. Notice we have two solutions, a 15% and a 40% solution of acid, and we're going to mix it to come up with a 20% acid solution. So we're going to let x be the amount of 15% acid solution, and then we'll let y be the amount of 40% acid solution. So these are the two solutions that we're mixing together to get to the 20% solution. Let's go ahead and draw little boxes because that really does help. Kind of gives you a little visual of the problem. Actually, I call these my beakers, but they kind of look like boxes. So in my first beaker, I have X amount of the 15% acid solution. I'm going to put 0.15. I'm going to add that to Y amount of my 0.40 solution to end up with 5 liters of my 0.20 acid solution. So remember, we need two equations now because we have two variables. And the first one is, you know that these two amounts have to add up to 5 liters. So X plus Y equals 5. And then our second equation, that's where we figure out the amount of acid in the solution. So we multiply 0.15 times X plus 0.40 times Y, and that has to equal 0.20 times 5, which is 1. And again, I'm going to use the top equation and solve for Y, because then I can substitute that expression into my Y in my second equation. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm going to put 5 minus x in for y in the second equation, and that allows me to solve for x. Let's distribute here the 0.40. So we get 2 minus 0.40x equals 1. And then we're going to add these like terms together. So we get a negative 0.25x plus 2 equals 1. Subtracting 2 from both sides so that we can isolate the x. Now we get negative 0.25x equals negative 1. And now we need to divide by this negative 0.25 so that we can isolate x. Use your calculator for this one, and x is equal to 4 liters. So that gives us the amount of 15% acid solution. So 4 liters of 15% solution, which means that because the two amounts have to add up to 5 liters, that leaves us with y equal to 1 liter of the 40% solution. In this problem, we have a total of $5,000 that are going to be invested in at 2 different rates. One has a 3% annual rate for interest, and the other one has a 5% annual rate for interest. After 1 year, we know that the total interest is $210, and we're trying to find how much money is invested at each interest rate. So because we have 2 amounts at 2 different interest rates, we will be using 2 variables, and we'll let x stand for the amount of money that we have invested at 3%, and y is going to represent the amount of money invested at 5%. So from the very first equation, you know that those 2 amounts of money have to add up to $5,000, and that gives us our first equation. Now our second equation is going to involve the interest that's earned on these 2 amounts. So we're going to use the equation I equals principal. Interest equals principal times rate times time. And so I'm going to make a little table here to allow us to organize our thoughts. And the principal, the P, that's the amount of money that you invest at each of the rates. So X amount of money is invested at the 3% or 0.03 rate. And it tells you that it's for 1 year. So T equals 1 for 1 year. And so therefore for I, for interest, we can multiply these 3 numbers and get 0.03x. Our second amount is y. We're investing that at the rate of 0.05 also for a year. And multiplying the principal times rate times time, in the second we get 0.05y. And then add these 2 interests from our table. They have to add up to $210 because that's what the problem tells us. And so we have our 2 equations and 2 unknowns. And this time we're going to use the elimination method just to practice that. And I want to eliminate the x, so I need this top x to be a negative 0.03x. So I'm going to multiply this top row by 0.03, which gives me a 0.03 300ths x minus 3 100ths y equals a negative 150. That does look like a 750, but it's a negative 150. And then I'm rewriting my second equation below. Notice that my x's cancel. That's what I did that on purpose to eliminate those 2. And then adding the 2 y's, I get 0.02y, 2 100ths y. And then here I have 210 minus 150, which is 60. Now I need to solve for y, so I'm going to divide by 0.02 or 2 100ths. And using my calculator, I know that 60 divided by 0.02 is $3,000. So that's the amount of money that we have invested at the 5%. And since we know the total, we invested $5,000, then that means that at the 3%, we must have invested $2,000. Let's check our interests and see if they work. And so I multiply 2,000 by 0.03 and I get 60. 3,000 by 0.05 and I get 150. And together those 2 do add up to $210. in interest.